listening to Smashing the Party. This is your host, Nate Baumberger.
Welcome tonight, Smashing the Party. This is Nightcap. I'm your host, Nate Baumberger. Whoa, where's my camera? Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Wow, that one never happened before. This was working, and then all of a sudden. You got to see my background. There we are. All right. Wow, that was crazy. Look, we always run into something new. This never happened where I couldn't see me. Welcome to tonight's show. I'm going to go off the cuff here, but I noticed looking at some of my past shows, and if you watch the show, you know I hate to watch my old shows. I hate it. Don't like hearing my voice, but I do it. I look at myself. I try to improve it. And I realized that the last couple episodes, I've been doing nothing but complaining. And I mean, this show is a complaint vessel for me, for my sanity. So you could just fuck off if you're like, well, you always complain. Yeah, I know. That's what I do, right? But I wanted to have a special brainstorming session tonight. So I called tonight's session brainstorming session, I think I called it. Let me just check the title to make sure. Solution brainstorm, right? And if you work in any kind of project management or engineering or any kind of thing that has to deal with the creative process or building things, you understand the brainstorm part of the process is where you're just throwing shit at the wall. A brainstorm is where you're just like, all right, just let the ideas fly. And if you're in a good brainstorm, everything's on the table, okay? So you're probably like, all right, dude, what's the fucking problem? Look, I've been talking about the problem the last couple of days and the complaining about the problem, and now mainstream's starting to get the hint. We're talking about Joe Biden's age. It's not an elephant in the room. It's a mammoth. It's a behemoth. It's Godzilla, King Kong. It's fucking huger than an elephant. Now, we know the other side. That's not an option. So Donald Trump isn't an option. So we need to brainstorm for the best options on the other side, in my opinion. But don't get me wrong. If none of this works, we always go with the original plan, and we push forward and put everything behind it, which is we nominate Joe Biden and we get him elected. Now, it doesn't make sense. We know. We watched his debate performance. We know he's old. Stop lying, by the way, if you're still on the fence of, stop, dude, you're going to make it worse. No, I'm just in fucking reality world. Just like I didn't like the delusional MAGA people. The delusional left now is like, oh, well, you just got to, no. He's too old. Again, if we can't figure it out, then I get it. We put all our eggs in Joe Biden and we watch him win the election in 2024. The hope that he wins the election. But we want the best. We want the best, and he's old, and we know it. He's been a great servant to this country. Don't get me wrong. Let's not disparage what Joe Biden's done. But he's old, okay? So that's the big complaint. If you're just checking in for tonight, that's what I've been complaining about as someone who tends to vote liberal because they right now are living in the world of facts, or at least the most part. I'm not going to be gaslit by the Democrats and say the debate performance is something that we can recover from. No, you're not going to be unless we do get performance-enhancing drugs. And as Jon Stewart has said, give him whatever the fuck he needs. I don't care if he's doing cocaine right beforehand. But he needs to be able to sell the policies that he's implemented and their effectiveness. And we need the standard bearer of the Democratic Party to be able to represent and sell their wares on the market, right? Come on, guys. We know this is an influencer game. It's not just a word that's coined recently because we have all this social media bullshit. It's real shit. It's real shit, okay? There are people influence. That happens. We can do this, all right? I don't know where I went with that, but let me just get back on the point. And so tonight's brainstorming session that I came up with is just me saying, look, I'm complaining a lot. I understand the problem. I understand why people get mad because I'm complaining. So tonight I'm just going to throw shit at the wall and have a brainstorming session. And I'm going to do it in real time. And the point of this is to say, all right, look, let's complain. Let's armchair quarterback a little bit. and see if we can actually throw some ideas that nobody's thought of maybe, or come up with ideas that maybe other people thought of that are validated through our second analysis, and we go forward. Now, I'm not going to whiteboard this shit and impress you with my whiteboard skills. I'm going to save that for job interviews and clients and presentations. No, but also I didn't have time. But my diagramming shit is top level, okay? Just don't even fuck with me. Anyway, I can't show that off because I didn't have a lot of prep time. So we're going to do this brainstorming the way I do anything, which is just orating it and talking through it. And I'm just going to throw stuff at the wall. But before I get to that crazy session, let's talk about the reality of what can happen. So there is a process in place for this scenario. People on the left, the right, the middle are like, well, if Joe Biden steps out, then all chaos breaks loose, because now, of course, it's going to create some chaos. But this process, there's a backup plan for this process. Both parties have something in place in their infrastructure which prevents them going to the ballot box without a nominee in the case that somebody falls out at the last minute. Now, it's an ideal situation. It would happen before the convention, and there's a reason for that. So before I go into the brainstorm session, let's just talk about that process real quick. Now, I know I'm all over the place. This is a brainstorm solution, but we're going to have some context and have some understanding of how do we actually make this work, even if we have all these crazy nominees or ideas we have. What is the reality that we're faced with if we do nothing and we just fall back to, letting the process run out? And so there's a process in place, and the democratic process, the convention process, is where that happens. And so I didn't get too much into the details of this before, but each of the party has a mechanism for representation within itself. And what I mean by that is your vote counts, of course, when you vote for a primary, but then there's another layer of process that happens that determines the candidate for president, for instance. And that is this delegate process and this superdelegate process and this convention that happens, and then this opportunity for everyone to formalize who the nominee is. So I'm going to walk through that a little bit because it's important. People are like, well, what happens if Joe Biden dies before it, or he gets aside? There's a place. It's not total chaos, okay? So for you folks that are like, well, you're just pushing, there's too much at risk. I'm on the side that there's too much at risk, but there's a process for this, and it works, and it makes sense. And what it means, what it basically entails, is that the supporters inside the party, also known as delegates and superdelegates, who are designated to kind of formally be the representation of a vote block. So, for instance, Lancaster might have three superdelegates or delegates that they'll send to the convention. You can opt to, typically the party will pick people to be these delegates. They go to the convention and then they go down and they basically line up and say, we're voting for Joe Biden. And because they're Joe Biden delegates, they go to the convention, and it's implied that they go to vote for Joe Biden. However, there is a scenario where something could happen by the time they get to the convention. Even though they signed up to be a delegate for Joe Biden, they could vote or move their delegate to somebody else. Let's say there was a coup inside the party, and we're like, you know what? We found out this guy is total trash. We don't want to nominate this Donald Trump-like person, so we're going to make a switch at the last minute once all this shit came out, and I'm not going to no longer give my delegate vote at the convention to Joe Biden. So in essence, they could essentially kind of thwart democracy by saying, you know what, I'm not, even though I was voted as a Joe Biden delegate, I'm no longer going to vote for Joe Biden at this convention. And what would need to happen is if a majority of those delegates decided to change their vote, then the party would nominate. Actually, there's another layer. Then there's a superdelegate layer, which the superdelegates can kind of override and put more influence and bring more influence into the party. They're typically former governors, presidents, senators, whatever. These superdelegates can kind of come in with a little bit more weight, and they offer almost another layer of override. So they could override almost to some degree, the delegates. And so while we have this process of voting for these primary candidates, inside the party, there's actually mechanisms that have to take place that formalize the vote for that candidate inside the party. So you do your vote, and we voted for Joe Biden. And what's going to happen if he weren't old, it would just be like, all right, we go to the convention, and it would just be a formal instance. Since all the delegates are voting for Joe Biden, they would just go and say, yep, we're with Joe Biden. He's our candidate, and the whole party unifies behind him. If he decides to step out, then this process could take place where we can go to the convention, and we would then have the delegates and the super delegates decide on another candidate, and it could be anybody nominated. So they can nominate anybody. So to think that they're overriding democracy through this process, they already have the machinations inside this party to override the wishes of the voter and the wish of the voter. And they're almost like emergency mechanisms. And it requires a massive movement of the Holy Spirit, if you will, the zeitgeist, to get that many people to say, yeah, we're going to actually, what we signed up for as Joe Biden's delegate, we're going to have to switch our vote at the convention and sign off and nominate somebody else. And then somebody else has to have a majority. So that's where the brainstorming session is going to come from. But I wanted to just lay it out. Hopefully that's not confusing, that there's a process in place that goes on, that happens should a candidate step out before the convention. And then those delegates and those folks that were allocated by the local parties to represent the delegate vote, when they go to the convention, they can nominate somebody else. And then that somebody else, if it gets a majority of the delegates, then that person becomes the nominee. So there could be an internal coup at any point. Some have argued that the DNC did this to Bernie several times. And you could argue that, it happens kind of under the hood. There's this push towards these super delegates and delegates to push them towards a certain candidate. That's totally true in both parties, and it's how the parties control who their candidates. So, by the way, that just should disgust you more, that Republicans, with all these internal mechanisms, and they're a little different, but they do have the same kind of fallback override kind of thing going on within their party. But that means that they did all that and they still had Donald Trump. They still allowed it. So with all the internal overrides that you could have to protect the party's standard bearer, they didn't pull any of them. They just allowed him to hold him up and hoist him up on our petard. So that makes it really hard even to swallow when you start to think about Republican scenario on their side. So theirs is not tenable. So all this brainstorming and talking is just about who we're going to do to replace Joe Biden. We're not talking about, it's not an option to have either Joe Biden or anybody lose to Donald Trump. And that means anybody, even another Republican, for Pete's sakes. If we had another Republican that would join on the Democratic side for whatever reason, it would be better. And I know I'm just going crazy, but we're in brainstorming session, real time, talking about it, trying to figure it out. So just deal with it. Let me just make sure nobody's commenting. All right, because I wanted to at least respond to comments if I get them. So anyway, all right. So let me just kind of make sure we understand this process and walk through it so that it's kind of clear. So let's say Joe Biden decides to step down as the Democratic nominee. The Democratic nominee is going to follow a certain process, or the Democratic Party is going to follow a certain process that's guided by the rules that have been established at the Democratic National Committee, at the convention. And so there's a breakdown that I'm going to walk through that hopefully will consolidate what I said earlier. And this is more extracting exactly from my notes from my research team that put this together. So Joe Biden voluntarily declines to be president, and he needs to step down voluntarily. There's no mechanism, by the way, within the DNC that allows other party leaders to forcefully remove him. So it's not like people can say, Joe, you have to step down or we're going to force you out. He has to voluntarily step out. Okay, that's number one. Then what happens is the delegates that exist would then have a decision. Biden's decision to step down would trigger an open process at the Democratic National Convention. What that means is they essentially can decide who they're going to give their pledge to. Even though they signed up to pledge their delegate vote support to Biden, the nearly 4,000 delegates are not legally bound to do that. And so they would have the freedom to support anyone they want. So, as I said before, these folks pledge they're going to vote for Biden. They do so typically. There's usually no problems. But in the case of Joe Biden declining to be the nominee, at that point, it would trigger this open process, and they would have the ability to move their vote. Now, they could still move their vote even if Joe Biden didn't trigger that process, which is interesting. And I think that's where the superdelegates come in and they override that. But let's just kind of keep going through this from the notes. So we've basically said Joe Biden declined. It triggers this process. The delegates now, the 4,000 delegates now aren't legally bound to vote for him. They can pledge their support to other candidates. Those delegates that were selected at state conventions with input from the Biden campaign obviously would need to be convinced to back a new candidate. This is where it gets tricky, and it's like, who would they pick? It would be required that more than half of them support a different nominee to ensure a majority. So there's a lot of chaos that happens in that room if this happens, because there would hope to be some kind of consensus among the delegates of who their next nominee would be. If all 4,000 delegates have a different idea of who they want to be their nominee, it's big trouble, because now we have a longer kind of convention process to figure out who's who. What's going on with my camera? It's weird, folks. All right, I'm back. I hope my stream didn't stop. That's weird. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. So I don't know where I lost here. I don't know where I froze up, but that's bizarre that I froze up. So Biden declines. The conventions now triggers this process. The delegates can pledge their vote to anyone. Obviously, they need to have a majority. The delegates then can select their nominee. And if then Biden steps down, the convention would be open for nominations at the same time. So while this process would trigger a couple things, it would allow this open kind of delegate process to pick a new nominee. It would also allow for them to nominate a new nominee. And so this is where we can brainstorm. So all these things happen at the convention. So it's not like we're in dire straits to say we can't actually pull this off and have a nominee and also unify all the support behind the nominee. That's the big thing everyone's talking about. It's like, well, what about all this? Look, once you have the nominee, the Democratic Party engine should kick in and the support should come in. Now it's just about doing the same thing we were going to do with whether it were any candidate, and that's destroy Donald Trump's legacy, destroy what he's done, and elevate everything Biden has done, and try to get that above the noise of the bullshit that the opposition's painting about how dire things are when we're actually on there are good trajectories in many ways. And Biden's having trouble selling this, by the way. This is the whole reason I've been complaining about this, is because I believe that his policies have been effective. I'm not saying they've been perfect, but they've been effective at pulling us out of this kind of rut towards going towards more inequality, of essentially how we're paying for drugs and healthcare and everything else that's still being on the table. I'm not saying it's perfect, by the way, but the Democratic Party puts these things on the table against the forces of capitalism that kind of enshrine these things as necessary for the economy when really they're necessary extractions. That's a whole nother topic. But so it's important, though, to understand that all this stuff that I'm talking about is in play along with the same kind of battle of ideas, which Democrats need to do a better job of, which is selling the effectiveness of the policies, because you can have one party just complaining about everything. You have one party acting like smashing the party and just complaining, and never offering solutions. And it's very easy to do that. Okay. It's less challenging. It's much more difficult to come up with solutions for those problems rather than pick everything apart. Right. So I'm owning my modus operandi. I'm not scared to say I'm a muckraker and I complain. I am coming in today with a new placard that says brainstorm solution brainstorm. So I'm at least trying. But jumping back to the process here, it's not that scary. For all you liberal folks who are like, oh, Nate, stop, please. Look, there's a process in place for this. It's codified in DNC. It would essentially, we would come out of the convention unified. That's the whole purpose of these conventions, is to deal with the internal party strife and then get everyone to back one candidate. And so the Bernie people moved to Joe Biden, and the Elizabeth Warren people moved to Joe Biden. And that's what happens at the convention. So with that being said, now brainstorming, who would it be? I mean, I've said on here many times, I'm not a fan of the whole passing the torch stuff. So Kamala Harris, while she's the next in line, I don't necessarily think she would be the best. I know how her approval ratings are. I know how much it would rival the base of the other side to have a woman, especially a woman of color. It would pull people off of their sofa in emergency. And I hate to say it, but she's not Barack Obama with the personality and the charm. And so, unfortunately, the misogyny of America, she's a rough candidate to elect. I like her. She's been, kind of bashed hard in the press for being a tough woman. And she's done a lot of things. She's been out in Hollywood. She has the California connections. She's that California elite. When she, with the typical growing from poverty story, though, which is crazy. But anyway, the point is that I see the flaws in her candidacy, and I understand, as somebody who doesn't just agree that passing the torch to the next person in line is the right way to go. I'm not all in on Kamala Harris. Okay, so I'm not. I could be convinced, but I'm also very scared of the misogyny that exists within the party, the racism that exists in the country, and how that can affect us in a short term. There'd be enough excitement and the vitriol originally before giving her a chance. People are going to get her, just put her in a category. And this is, by the way, going to happen for any of the candidates that have a uniqueness about them, unfortunately. If it's not old fucking white single male or white male, cis male, then it's, we know. Look at the two candidates we're trying to replace here. And this is what we ended up with. And we know there's better folks out there with that have a track record with Joe Biden, but are younger and able to articulate and sell the efficiencies, the effectiveness, the superiority of the policies versus the policies that were in play 4 years before you got elected. That's the whole goal of the standard bearer. So that's why we're here, folks. Don't just think I'm complaining. I'm throwing stuff at the wall today, but hopefully so far, at least you got a process taking away some of the fear that this is just completely, oh my gosh, we're in La La Land. It's scary because this is known, and the more information that's rolling out, it's like they've been doing things to prevent this and having him see people. And I don't give a shit what they've been stimming him up with. The point is, I think it's starting to come out that there has been some hedging behind the scenes and the knowledge of, hey, we got to keep this hush hush. Well, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to be the party of fucking propaganda. I get it's all propaganda at some point to somebody, but let's be honest and talk about what we saw on TV and deal with it. Okay, that's where we're at. So, but Kamala Harris, I said all that just by the way to say, like, there's a process in place that we can deal with this. So in today's solution brainstorm, I wanted to put that context up of, like, we're not in total, oh my God, there's nothing we can do, or we're no man's land. There's no rules, and no, there's rules in place, and we can do this. We can unify the party before the election in November. And there's an internal process to do this that people shouldn't be scared of. So it just comes down to, will Biden voluntarily step aside? No one can make him step aside. That's kind of a key component to all these switches that trigger. If he declines, is he's got to step aside himself. And it's not like, unless they get behind the 25th Amendment and try to override him in office or something to that effect. So it becomes tricky with him. Obviously they'd sit down with him and say, hey, look, we really think you should. It's best for the party. And then he, with his ego being it how it is, I'm sure he would say, if enough people said to him, I'm sure that he would step down. I would hope he would. But he needs to voluntarily step down, and that's when these rules trigger, and that's where we have these things that can happen that are they're not outside of the norm of what happens, other than typically they go and vote for their pledge without switching it when they go to the convention. Okay, look, if you want to learn more about that, Google it. I try to do as best a job with the information that my researchers put together to help you understand in layman's terms the internal machinations of the Democratic Party does have a process for handling the situation we're in. Now, Kamala Harris, not so hot on Kamala Harris. You guys know who I'm hot on, but let's just go through the names that were thrown out. Gavin Newsom, I like him a lot. He's super sharp. He's great. I just am wary of anyone that's that sharp and good looking and charming. And he also was married to the person that's now married to Donald Trump's son. So that's bizarre. And I don't know what to think of that. Look, as someone who was single until I was 36, I understand the extravagant dating lifestyle that one can have, when on the free market. What I don't understand is the mapping between her and Donald Trump's Kimberly Guilfoyle or whatever. Guilfoyle. Always have weird names. Guilfoyle. I don't know whatever her name is, but she looks different now, and that's fine. She's changed her face a little bit, done the Hollywood dance. Again, I don't judge, but she looks different now. I don't find that I typically don't mind that any work done, but sometimes it's weird. In this case, it's different. So I am being a little judgmental, and I apologize, women. I don't care about that stuff, but it's just that she's gone through this very visceral change publicly, so it's noticeable. And maybe I shouldn't even be commenting on anyone that has any kind of dysmorphia, but it's just interesting. So his pair up with her just brings questions to mind for me. I know that's really digging, and I don't care what he does in his personal life. I just want to know what his judgment is when put under the gun. And I feel like, sometimes you can kind of find the folks that people are attracted to, maybe toxic or not. There can be some hints to their kind of core. And I'm way in there. And by the way, the reason, I'll say this honestly, the reason I'm a little bit more trepidatious with any dude is because of the things that have happened with dudes that, come out of the limelight. They're this shining star. Look at the attorney, Michael, whatever his name was, when he was coming after Trump. And then it turns out he's kind of doing all this scummy shit. And so dudes can be kind of elevated, hoisted into a public position without truly dealing with their demons a lot of times. And I think that it's less likely with women. And so I prefer a woman that's vetted, a non-vetted woman over a semi-vetted man coming from no man's land. I know I'm overgeneralizing, and I'm a man. I'm just saying this isn't a virtue signaling or penance I'm paying by saying this. I'm saying it because if I was to make a gut decision on somebody that you just showed me out of the gate, I would have more questions. I would be asking the questions about the man or the bear in the woods. When it comes to the man versus the woman, I'm like, all right, she was probably a mother. She's probably already done a lot of these things and had to break down in some of these ways that and fight her demons in ways that men don't have to do. I'm so chauvinistic. I know in the way of when I say chauvinistic, I'm definitely a core believer that women are superior in that way, in that they just have natural tendencies to deal with things in an emotional way that men don't or aren't capable of right away. So that's why there's initial trust mechanism that triggers for me when a woman's in power first. And whatever that means, I don't know if that translates to any kind of anything in my personal life. I'm trying to think, but it's just kind of how I view it. So Again, Gavin Newsom, I like everything about him. I'm just little like, what's going on? Is there something, dude? Is there some dark secret? What's going to happen here? And then, so I like him. I like him a lot. Let's see who else. Gretchen Whitmer, just not high profile enough for me. I don't know much about her. Although when I start looking into the things she's done, definitely strong. Pete Buttigieg, I think he's not super bright. Reminds me of Barack Obama when he talks. I don't know if that's on purpose. I don't think America will get behind him. I think he would pull people off the sofa. I think anyone on the Democratic side is going to pull people off the sofa that have a little bit of misogyny or some demographic prejudgment, prejudice, but I look at Pete Buttigieg and he is strong, might be a little young to some people. I don't know. I like him probably better than Gavin Newsom. But I don't know. They're both strong, and I like them. By the way, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, and Pete Buttigieg are all better candidates than Donald Trump. And so, I don't know which one I would want. It's really difficult out of those. But then you know what I'm going to say. I love Elizabeth Warren. I love her so much. She's brutal. She's fierce. She's smart. She understands how to argue. She understands how to frame things. She understands how to teach. She understands how to break things down. I love everything about her. Not saying any of those other folks can't. I also gave Elizabeth Warren my money during her primary. So, and I came through like this whole personal journey for how I came up to Elizabeth Warren. I didn't like her at first, and I say this all the time. I didn't like the way her voice sounded. It was like weird because I started reading the things she was saying and, learning about her credentials in bankruptcy law and all the things she's done at the high level, at an academic level, to help consumers at the lower level. I thought it was brilliant. I thought she was using her intelligence in just a magnificent way. And it was awesome. And I just liked her story. Then I came around to liking her, just ignoring the misogyny in her voice. I don't know what it was, but then now it's her voice can put me to sleep. It's soothing. I want to hear her yell and scream at somebody or do anything that she does because I just think she's so effective. And one of the things, by the way, that got me over the fence was when everyone was hawing about the Russian report and no one was reading it. I read it and I looked at it. I was like, this is crazy. And then she read it. She's like, this is absolutely insane. This is crazy. It needs an investigation. If any of this is true, it's all crazy. And then you had Republicans and people just like saying, no, we didn't read it. And I'm holding my tongue. And it's like, for me, that was a moment of like, okay, she's not going to gaslight me. She's just going to say what she says. And that's what I've seen. So I'm big on the gaslighting kind of. We need to make sure we're not doing the same thing that Republicans have been doing to their own party with Donald Trump and saying, yeah, he represents everything about you. He's the same as you, and he's not, and we know he doesn't, and he doesn't care. We don't want to do that. I don't think any party should do that, but Democrats certainly don't want to step in and say, oh, no, Joe Biden's not really too old. Everything's fine. You're not seeing – that's just a stumble. Those are just moments of blah, blah, blah. Nah, stop. We're already doing the same dumb shit that they're doing the other side, so we're not going to go there. But you've got, Gavin Newsom, I like, again, every time I see him, he's always on Fox News. I don't know if he's friends with Sean Hannity or not, but he's always on Fox News destroying them. And of course, those are the videos that come up my feed. So who knows? But I get these small clips, and I know I know people hate him out in California. Every time he's just money on camera. He's a certainly, if I was wanting anybody to sell policies, sell anything, I mean, he would be my guy. He is brilliant. He can sell things. He can frame things. I love how he frames things as well. So I am a Gavin Newsom fan, but I just don't know enough about him, with my just kind of personal secret fear of men being scumbags, I guess. I don't know. And I'm not projecting here. I'm saying I've done my work. I was a crazy motherfucker, but certainly You just wonder if folks are going to deal with their demons when they get to the big leagues, or they're going to come out and they're going to be stupid. And that's the big thing for people. Everyone goes through shit, but can they go through shit at a high level and be the person that they need to be? And we know Donald Trump has never dealt with anything. That's why it's a non-starter. We know Biden's dealt with several different tragedies and traumas and been in positions, but he's just too old. So, again, I'm not going to just throw someone under the bus for things they did in their personal life. I want to be clear. I've said that even about Donald Trump. But I do think it's important in this case that we have a candidate that can kind of run for a couple months pretty clean and be like Barack Obama. I mean, Barack Obama had a sordid past, but he was a family man and got his shit together. And so that's the better story for me, is someone that was a crazy mofo and gets their shit together. I kind of like that style. Maybe because it's kind of how I operate too for a long time. I was a little crazy, and then I, eventually got my shit together to where I can keep it taped up with Post-it notes and make it seem like I'm a functioning human being. But if you run a podcast or live stream, maybe you're already broken. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Calm down. But anyway, so Gretchen Whitmer, I don't know enough about. I should learn more about her, because the fact that her name's been circulated means that people like her at some level. So I need to do more research on that. But that's another name that's been coming out. My team didn't put anything together for her. But I think the big ones that are coming out are Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg. Who else is there? Whatever happened to Stacey Abrams, by the way? I'd love her. I mean, she was definitely someone I'd put in the mix here. I know you say what you want, but she's got that community organizer style, Barack Obama, love that I, kind of love of the community that I really think thrives in a campaign. So by the way, any of those candidates would have to kind of come together or lobby and start to campaign themselves for these superdelegates. So just because we might like Elizabeth Warren, again, the flawless candidate in my opinion, other than she lives in a flawed system, is that they would have to start campaigning. And Elizabeth Warren I reached out to her Facebook page, and somebody on there responded to something I said, and it was like, the senator's not running. She's decided she's going to put everything in her senator campaign. It seemed like somebody that worked in her office, maybe not, but there was no response on it. It was on her page. And, I'm important enough for her to respond to. I don't know. But I got the feeling from watching her and how she's talking right now, she's not interested. And so, part of what has to happen for this process to take place of replacing Biden would be the candidate has to kind of start campaigning at some point. And so, Biden, that's why you're finding pressure to say, Biden, stop, decline right now, so that persons or people can start campaigning for your delegates and give them enough time to get vetted and everything else. So that's why you're seeing folks like the Disney Harris and George Clooney and other large donors say, listen, we got to start this now. Just decline. Let's not take the whole of the convention. Let's give these candidates an opportunity to throw their name in the ring. And maybe somebody I didn't mention today. There's other folks. Bernie Sanders. I mean, definitely somebody. He's, again, for me, old white person. We need to move away from it. But he's definitely somebody who could throw his hat in the ring and probably earn the support of several delegates and superdelegates. The key is going to be to make this happen and at the convention solidify it, unify, and then come out with one candidate. And this is a typical process. So Democrats that are out there saying, oh, no, you're fucking everything up by talking about it. No, I'm not. There's a process, and the ballers, not the political consultants, not the people that live in fear, but the people understand this, say, look, we all understand we can put a candidate in place, have the party unified and ready to go against Donald Trump, take over, have a new standard bearer, and push forward and trampoline off of the Biden policies that we found effective with a new personality and a new kind of run on this. And so there's nothing stopping us from talking about this and making it happen. So the fear mongering and everything else, and you start to see folks coming my way. I say my way because I said it, right? The fucking debate. Jon Stewart aligning, obviously. He has a bigger platform than me, but he's certainly out there saying the same shit. Don't gaslight me. Let's get another person in place. Let's figure this out. We can do this. We're not going to be the party of lies. All the same things that I've been saying here. And so it's possible. What I wanted today, though, to break down was throw you some ideas for candidates, maybe brainstorm session, but also during this session of brainstorm solutioning, as they like to say in the tech worlds, we're going to solution today, is that I wanted for us to understand that the process is in place for all of this to happen. It's not crazy. It works through the internal machinations of the party, their delegate system, and how they nominate their candidate at the convention allows for this backup plan or for the standard bearer to be replaced at the convention. So I'm going to wrap today with that. I know I've been trying to keep it under an hour. I've been struggling. But today's hopeful brainstorm session, rant, off the cuff, you learned something today. If you didn't, you probably just weren't listening. Think about it. You probably didn't understand that there is actually a process in place to handle somebody declining to take the nomination or something happened to the nominee and solidifying around a candidate. And it's totally something that has happened in the past. It can happen again. It is not scary. We can win this with a new candidate, with new blood, and people just need to coalesce around the concept that we cannot have somebody in office who can't sell the effectiveness of their policies. And that includes Donald Trump, who is an existential threat to democracy, as we know. But it also includes us being honest with ourselves and looking at the candidate standard bearer that Democrats have and saying, look, we got to replace this. Now, if the Democratic Party can't get their shit together, there's no question I'm voting, and you should too, for Joe Biden. I'm not going to be thrilled with it, and it's going to be untenable, and it's going to be bad. But it's going to be 10 million times better than the opposition winning and Project 2025 coming out and then marching down the authoritarian personal responsibility, fucking lying, taking away your ability to live the way you want to live, motherfucking shit is going to come into play. And that's not even a consideration. So I'm going to continue to waffle over here and talk about solutions, talk about ideas, and complain about our situation with the intent, with the knowledge, of course, of voting against the destruction of America, which is what Donald Trump represents, in my opinion, which is in the opinion of many, many, many people who are smarter than me. So this isn't just a crazy podcaster with a funky background saying this shit. Anyway, you know what I really realized just now looking at my screen, which bothers me a lot? This is my vanity coming out. That. I didn't have my glow. The glow is something that stops people from scrolling, and they're like, whoa, this guy's got a glow. So now everything feels better. All right, so let me just break down what I said so far. I went through the process. Conventions, delegates, voluntary declination by Biden. The convention's triggered. The convention delegates' role is triggered. The open process is triggered for the Democratic National Convention. The delegates can pledge to some other candidate. The candidates have to be nominated. There has to be a majority. The superdelegates can then come in and kind of override or have significant influence over the selecting the nominee. Then, of course, they would continue to endorse Biden, and particularly Kamala Harris, if she isn't the nominee, she could certainly sway delegates to and then everyone would need to get around the delegates and say, hey, delegates, we need you to switch to these people. And then consensus would happen. Obviously, Joe Biden would help sell that to say, look, this is who I think you should nominate and who should be the next person. So there's a process in place that happens if this thing were to be activated. If Biden so does do what's best and decline to be the nominee, we have a process, and party leaders and officials, as well as delegates that are picked by the local Democratic parties, would be able to select a new nominee, and we could all then coalesce around them and be ready to go against Donald Trump. Donald Trump has nothing to run on other than just the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the xenophobia, the fear mongering that he likes to do, the pointing at others, blaming other people for your problems, and finding boogeymen. There's nothing new with what he's bringing to the table. So all we need to do is get somebody who can say, look, yeah, Joe Biden did a great job. Obviously, he's old. I'm stepping in now. Going to continue to do Joe Biden's work. We got a lot more work to do, and maybe I have a stronger position on this, or they're different somewhere, but it's all is not lost. So, today's brainstorming session, just know that we have a process that's in place. We can do this. We have plenty of time to unify it around a candidate. This isn't the end of the world to swap out Joe Biden. It's not a loss for Democrats. They don't have to take it as a loss. They have to take it as they can make it look like a win. I mean, we're faced with reality, and we're going to do what's best for the country. And our people aren't connected to power and need to hold on to it relentlessly when the best interests of the country are at stake. It's something. Somebody could put together some word salad that sells that better than I just did. There's got to be, right? So hopefully today, at least you got something out of this to know that all is not lost. Stop fucking acting like people that are talking about the reality of the situation are going to fuck it up for everyone else when we're the folks that are trying to keep it real. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's session. I know I got some input from yesterday's, and people don't really appreciate me complaining all the time, although Republicans love this shit, and they're in my inbox trying to trigger me every now and then, which is fine. I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate everybody, even folks I disagree with. I'm trying not to be a jerk. Sometimes I can get nasty and be a little prickly, a trolly motherfucker. I'm trying to do less of that, so please comment. I'm not going to just fight you or bite your head off unless it's completely stupid. Although I will say that, I do have a pretty happy trigger finger. Happy trigger finger. I do get hot quick. I'm a little teapot maybe. Anyway, thanks for checking in. Again, stats are great. We're now month 3, May, April, May, June, July. We're month 4, and we've had steady increases. We're now past the 90-day kind of window that Facebook shows. You can now see my true trajectory of Smashing the Party, and it's fantastic on Facebook. It really is. It's fantastic on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you. I'm asking you, begging you, please continue to follow me. View it on YouTube. You may lose your Facebook access soon enough. But in the meantime, I appreciate all the love, all the commentary, especially the folks that comment on the YouTube videos and go and watch those. Despite my small following on YouTube, since I started in April, I gained 15 new 15 new followers, 17 new followers. 17 new people subscribe to me on YouTube, okay? And I have 2 videos that have over 100 views on YouTube. I know, small numbers to people that have large followings. But for me, I'm exciting, and I'm actually pleased as fuck that I have videos that have over 100 views on it, too, on YouTube. Look, to me, it's like putting it on TV and 100 people watched it. So maybe 3 of them were me, but still, it's pretty awesome. So thanks for that. I appreciate the support. Make sure you check me out tomorrow, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Smash the Party. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook. And especially make sure you click on YouTube and tell your friends. Tell your friends about it. Tell them to check this guy out. There's some good episodes. I'm going to start slicing stuff up someday when I have time. But in the meantime, I'm just going to keep cranking it out Monday through Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Nate Bomberger, your host, Smashing the Party. Thanks for joining, everybody.